Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kai. Welcome to the presentation on developing integrated OpenPGP support. That's what I'm currently working on. I've been with Mozilla and as a Mozilla contributor since 2001. And currently I'm with the Thunderbird team. And currently we work on integrating OpenPGP support. So let's see what it's all about. I have around 28 slides, but I want to go through them very quickly and briefly. So we have time at the end for a demo and for a question. So OpenPGP is a derivative of the original PGP, which is a file format for encryption and digital signing. It's defined in this RFC. It can be used with email, and how to use it with email is described in a standard called PGP MIME, defined in this RFC. What about OpenPGP and Thunderbird? Well, it had been originally requested for Mozilla Mail at a time when Mozilla Thunderbird was not yet born. It was just Mozilla Mail. So it was requested in 1999. And it wasn't done earlier for many reasons, but I guess one of the reasons was that it had always been a license conflict between Mozilla's MPL license, which is more flexible and which with the available PGP software, which has either been commercial or GPL, which is more strict. So yeah, so we never got integration in the past. So what happened before 2020? You could still use it. You could still use OpenPGP with Thunderbird because there is a great add-on, which is called Enigmail. But that add-on is glue code. It's integration code. It actually requires that you have GNU-PG software installed externally. It helps you in the newer versions to get it set up, but you have to figure it out and get it installed separately. Now, what's changing? In 2020, we are seeing changes. As you know, Thunderbird code depends a lot on the Mozilla platform code. Basically, Thunderbird is a script Firefox with all the Thunderbird email user interface added and all the email protocol code added. So we depend on that a lot. And we see that Mozilla's primary priority is Firefox. And they make constantly changes to their platform. And we have to adapt. And one of the changes they are making is that the traditional kind of add-ons, which had a lot of power and could change almost anything in the application, those add-ons will no longer be supported in the future. Actually, in the future is near. The future will be for us this year when we release the next Thunderbird 78 version in the summer. With this version, the traditional add-ons will no longer work. And this was also the reason for the author or maintainer of Enigmail, Patrick Brunswick, who to say, sorry, that's no longer doable. And he said there will no longer be an add-on after Thunderbird 68. That means end of the Thunderbird 68 lifetime is until September, October, end of this year. And then you can no longer use Enigmail with a newer Thunderbird version. So what should we do? We heard that, and we know that a lot of people depend on Enigmail. They want to use OpenPGP. It's a good, available, and free cross-platform solution to use OpenPGP. So it seems like the Thunderbird team said, it seems very important that we offer a solution beyond that. And then we decided, okay, let's integrate the functionality directly into Thunderbird. So it works out of the box. But how should we do that? It's a big project. We have limited amount of time. And we don't have unlimited developer resources. So we need a solution where we don't have to start at zero. We must find something that we reuse technology. And also we need cross-platform support, because that's what Thunderbird is. Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, and derivatives and other Unix flavors. So what should we do? Well, we still have the same situation that the GNU-PG software is GPL only. And we cannot directly bundle it. In theory, there could be a solution where we bundle an installer and install it separately, but that seemed like a lot of hassle. And from the Enigmail maintainer, Patrick, he said that the fact that Thunderbird had to interact with an external application was a constant source for support trouble. So we decided, no, we don't want to go there. We need a different solution. We need something that we can directly integrate and ship directly with Thunderbird. So we searched for something, for a library. It needs to be something that we can bundle. It shouldn't require separate components installation. It must be compatible with the MPL license. As I said, we don't use GNU-PG by default. And the one library we found that fulfilled all our expectations without having tried it yet in detail was the RNP library, which is based on the Botan cryptographic library. So we started to see what we can get out of that. So what are the consequences of using RNP? RNP provides the base technology for handling OpenPGP messages and data structure. But there's a lot of things that, for example, GNU-PG has a very large set of functionality. And RNP in comparison is rather limited to the core of what you need for processing OpenPGP messages and creating them. So, but a lot of things we have, because we no longer can use GNU-PG, a lot of things we have to do ourselves. For example, the key storage. And in particular, the trust management for public keys. How do we do that? We have to implement it ourselves. So that means just using RNP is not sufficient. We need lots of functionality in addition. And where do we start? We decided we need to reuse as much as we can. And we decided, let's reuse Enigmail and rewrite it or adjust it, change it to use RNP instead. So as a side note, Thunderbird has for a long time also supported a different email encryption standard, which is called S-MIME. And we also decided that S-MIME support should stay. It might be nowadays that it's no longer in widespread use for individual users. It seems it's more popular in organizational environments. But nevertheless, that is an important group of users for Thunderbird too. So we decided it should stay. And if we have two different mechanisms for encrypted and digital signed emails, so it seems important that we have some kind of consistency between these two standards, technologies that so that the user isn't getting confused too much with these two options. For example, if you compare the old Enigmail implementation, it had restrictions and it didn't replace the S-MIME user interface, but instead added some additional control on the side. But it seems like with our new direct integration, it would be better that we have them well integrated and have worked similarly. So as another side note, you know, there are lots of opinions on OpenPGP out there. If you read Twitter on OpenPGP, there are a lot of opinions. Oh, well, maybe you shouldn't use it at all. But I think, well, because there are some problems you cannot avoid. Metadata, what happens if you forward an encrypted email without encryption? That's just too risky. Well, yeah, maybe that's true, but it can also be done with a signal message you get. You can also forward that without, and forward it in a plain text email. So, so I think it's still a good use case to have that we can encrypt an email if someone really needs to. And there are many people who really want to use it. And we also have the detail that how do you use OpenPGP? It's a message standard, but you could be flexible or make your own choices how you integrate it into the user interface and the usability. So there is one aspect you could decide. Do you want it to have it as easy as possible without the user even noticing? That's what the opportunistic and automatic approach is. Or do you rather want to have it manually, with where the user has to be aware, has to opt in, and manage the keys on their own? We discussed this a lot, but we felt like with an opportunistic approach, you have some risks that you might not notice certain attacks. So we decided we want to try the approach where the user is in control and has to make more choices on their own. So what are our objectives? We want to make it possible to use OpenPGP with Thunderbird, but we don't want to push the user to use it. It should be the user's choice. We want to rework the Enigmail user interface to make it more integrated. And also, because we no longer use GNU-PG, you know, GNU-PG is really a very flexible piece of software. You can do a lot of things that many users probably wouldn't want to do, or is too complicated for them to do. So I think a past objective of Enigmail was to make it possible to use as many of GNU-PG's features as possible. I think we are moving away from that. We would like to have something that's more integrated, easier to understand, but also cuts down on the amount of different features we're offering. So then, we think digital signatures are an important aspect of OpenPGP, even without encryption. So you have a good confirmation of the sender of a message. This can be useful if you post messages in public. That's still used today on some news groups or mailing lists where people announce new software versions. So, and it's usable without encryption. So I think, yes, we should support that. And also, of course, we want to offer end-to-end encryption from sender to recipient. And we think that should be stronger than the implementation of that should be stronger than just transport encryption. With transport encryption, I mean, I'm referring to the fact that you have multiple hops when email travels from sender to their own mail server, to gateways, to routers, to other hops and relays, and then to the final email server, and then only then finally to your own inbox. So in theory, you already have some kind of protection between these hops, because the internet as a whole is moving to more encryption with it on the transport layer. But still, that gives the opportunity to everyone who controls the hop to look at your data. So that's, I think, a reason why a good end-to-end encryption should protect you from the people who control the hops and not give them an ability to trick you and break your end-to-end encryption in some way. That's also a reason why I think we shouldn't use opportunistic encryption, because opportunistic encryption, where you rely on keys coming in automatically and you use them automatically, has some risk and could allow an active attacker who controls the hop, for example, your own email server, to send you some false data. But that's a long discussion. I think there are also strong opinions, what's better or not. But for now, I think we are heading towards the stronger approach, which doesn't use opportunistic encryption. Right, it should protect you against the monster in the middle, and not just from passive listening. So, yeah, and our objective is also, we want to avoid that users have undesired consequences of end-to-end encryption. For example, there was a couple of years ago, there was a poll in the Thunderbird community, and they said, I don't want encryption to be automatically enabled and my email archive suddenly being encrypted without me noticing. And if I mess it up and lose my keys, then I can no longer access my email archive. That's an undesired consequence. And that's why I think it's important that we involve the user, so the user is aware of what's happening and say, no, okay, I really need to be careful and make a backup of my keys so that I can continue to access my email archive. Also, I don't have a full overview, but I think there are some jurisdictions in the world where using encryption could maybe bring you into trouble. So I think it's better to leave the choice to the user if they enable it or not. But however, of course, we should assist the user. We should make it discoverable, and hopefully understandable. So, the current status. As I said, Thunderbird 68 Enigmail ends in September. We have today a beta that is usable with the new OpenPGP integration. There's lots of fresh code, and we have already, of course, we still have bugs. We need to find them and fix them. And even more so, we are using now a new library. From my experience, the RMP library is pretty good, and it seems to work well to me. However, it has not yet been as widely used as GNU-PG. You notice that when you use all kind of edge case situations. For example, it's strict and says, oh no, this key has a private key or public key algorithm that I no longer, that has been officially deprecated, so I just reject it. So that's an example. We have to work with the RMP library developers to make their code more lenient and more appropriate for real world use. But they are great people to work with, and I'm very optimistic that we can get all these details sorted out. So, but of course, there could also be, despite this optimism, there could be serious issues hanging around, lingering, and so we still count on security expert to help us and identify these issues and report them. So, and the time was short, and there's many things we haven't yet done yet. And in particular, many convenience features are not yet done. So, yes, you know, we depend on Mozilla schedule. We must issue, we must follow the schedule, because eventually we will no longer get security fixes for the base platform that Thunderbird uses. So we are forced to switch to new versions, and this will happen again this summer, the next cycle. And because that's also the same where classic add-ons are no longer supported, we really don't have much choice. We have to be ready in some way and release the Thunderbird 78 and hopefully with usable OpenPGP. But in the past also, the Thunderbird project used the approach, let's just do one major feature release per year, and then this release remains mostly stable with only minimal changes. I would hope that this year we break this rule, because the time has been so short for OpenPGP and so many things are still missing. I would hope that we will be able to release .x releases with not just urgent fixes, but also improvements. So a little bit about the implementation. As I said, it's already possible to use OpenPGP. It's not happening automatically. The user needs to be aware and understand what's happening. And we use the minimal implementation that we were able to get done in the limited time. Currently, what does it mean currently when you are a user who wants to start using it? You have to know what you're doing currently. If you want to actively use OpenPGP for encrypt, decrypt, or signing, you need to configure your own personal key. And currently, because of the lack of user interface support, it's pending, but it's not yet there. Currently, the user must know what to do. We have an integrated key manager ported from Enigmail, which allows you to import a key or create a new one. But we are currently actively discussing in Bugzilla how to make that easier and have some interactive assistance to get users started and tell them about their options, etc. So when you receive an email, we already show the digital signature status that works even if you don't have configured a personal key yet. If it's an unknown key, there will be a special symbol that shows an uncertain signature. I will briefly give a demo that will cover some of these details, but let's go quickly through it from a high-level description point of view. So, and we have the ability to use more details of the status of a received message. And then a big part of the implementation is how do we handle trust in public keys of other people? Initially, we have only implemented the manual trust model. No automatic trust, no web of trust. The user must decide which keys are acceptable. I'm using this new key acceptable. You know, in the PGP world, there is this term validity, but I think that in some way the validity blends in two different things. It blends in, is it still valid in general, like not expired, not revoked, and also does it, have I signed it? Have I used it previously? Is it, so am I willing to accept it? So I think that's an experiment with this wording. I think it could be useful and helpful to call it like that. So in general, the user has to decide, is the key acceptable or not? And the user interface allows you to manage that at the time you import a key, or you could do that later. And we encourage user to verify the correctness of a key, fingerprint comparison, but it's optional. If the user, we allow the user to accept the key without detailed verification. And what we intend to do is this is intended as some kind of trust on first use or trust on first acceptance. So at least, you know, I have accepted this key, and in the future, we can warn you if you see a different key. So that's still to do, but I think that's a high priority for me to do. And obtaining public keys, currently we support. You can import it if it's coming to you with an email attachment, you have it on file or on the web. We also import it if it's in an invisible autocrypt header, or we can download it from servers that support WKD, or we can discover them from keysopenpgp.org. The next topic is sending email. Again, no automatism. The user decides if encryption is used or not for an individual message. The user must manually enable it. The only difference is currently if we reply or forward an encrypted message, we enable it automatically. But if the encryption is enabled, you must have accepted keys for all recipients, or you cannot send the message. That's actually the same behavior that we have had all the time for SMI. Yes, we could work on that in the past to maybe have other modes like a preference which says encrypt if possible, if we have all keys. Yeah, we probably want to do that, but that's more tricky to do. If you want to have a good UI and want to have the user being aware of what's happening and when, I think that needs more detailed thoughts, and we are not there yet. That's something for the future. So what does an accepted key means? You must review it and mark it as accepted. The traditional thing is that you sign someone else's key, right? Now here's a deficient. Here is something that is not yet working on RMP. RMP does not yet support adding a signature to someone else's key. They're working on that for us, and we'll add that later. But initially, because we're also not yet supporting the web of trust, we have used a different approach where we have our own storage to remember the user's trust decision, the acceptance decision. So yeah, we do that. We want to avoid that a false key is automatically used. I think it's useful that at least if you get a new key, the user should be prompted and see the new key at least once and be required to at least look at it. I think that gives all people who are in some kind of risky situation and who really need to be certain what they're doing, at least it gives them a chance to notice, oh, there is a key. Do I really want to use it? Or do I care? Do I worry about my communication with that person? If yes, maybe now I should really go ahead and verify and call that person if that's really the right key. So gives the users a chance to notice what's happening with the keys. We can discuss how this will be in the future. So that also means you cannot send a message unless you have all keys, and if you have accepted all keys, or you have at least one accepted key for each recipient. If it's not possible, then we cannot send. We'll tell the user, and we also explain the user in detail. And we have a new UI where we tell the user in detail and try to assist him to fix the situation. Okay, now let's briefly look at how it's looking. We have the preferences. We have a new tab which replaces the old SMIME security tab. This is a combined new preferences tab where you combine both. You can combine either one, or you can configure both OpenPGP and SMIME. You have some choices for your default. And what you see here, I have already configured an OpenPGP key. This is a personal key where we intend to have some direct and good assistance for the user in the future. Right now, it's just a selection on the list the keys that you have. So very simple, but we plan to enhance that soon. Okay, and with the key manager, this is ported from Enigmail. We have some standard operations. You can generate a new key, or you can import keys that you have from external storage. If you exported your secret key with PG, you can import it here. So let's see. When you receive a message, let's look at this one. So this is a rather fresh profile of Thunderbird. I haven't done much here besides creating my own new key and sending it out as a test. Now here we have a received message with a signature on it. And what does this icon mean? That means it's an uncertain signature. If we click it, we get a detailed explanation. So, and the signer's key ID. So this dialog is dynamic. It explains what's happening with that message. We also show whether it's SMIME or OpenPGP. And we have some hints. So these are, if you look at the UIs that we are offering, please don't complain too much to us, and especially don't complain to Alessandro, our UI expert, because a lot of these things were initial quick solutions which I did and which are not yet refined, which need to be reworked and rethought how to do them better. But for now, at least we have a place where you can discover them and start experimenting with it. So this message has a signature from a key we don't have yet. So we are offering to discover the key that will search. I clicked it and it already searched WKD and the key's OpenPGP server. It found a key that's imported, and that's what's happening now. We have imported the key, and in addition, we give you the opportunity to look at more details and make your decision. Are you willing to accept this key? So let's do that. If we do that, we see an old key details dialog from Enigmail, which we have also adjusted. There's a new area here. We asked him, we offer the user to make the choice of your acceptance for this key. We accept it for verifying digital signatures and for encrypting messages. And we have the warning, avoid using a rogue key, and that it's ideal to verify the fingerprint. So let's say I'm verifying this fingerprint is my own. What happens then? Not automatically refreshed currently. That needs to be fixed. If I go back, I see something more than we had in the past. We have two icons. The first thing is we have a good signature icon. That's the same one we had with SMIME in the past. And in addition, this is an attempt to visualize how well you have verified the identity, the key ownership. And right now, as you saw, I marked it as verified, as fully verified. So we get a person with a green check. Let's do another experiment. This is another email. This is another email from a different email address. This key is not on key server. So if I click discover, it won't work. It's again an uncertain signature, but the key is attached. So that worked already in Enigmail. That's imported. This time I'll say unverified. Okay, let's okay use it. I'm okay to communicate with that person, and I don't mind too much changing stuff with that person. So I don't want to go through the hassle to verify right now. So let's mark it as unverified. And then if we go to the email back, we'll have a different icon for the person. It will warn you, okay, this is a good signature, but you haven't verified if that really is the owner's key. So that's the new idea here. It's just a different visual presentation. A third experiment, yes, we already also support from autocrypt headers. So it's attached, so let's import it directly. And now I'll make an experiment. No, let's say, well, maybe I find out, no, this key, maybe even the person called me and told me, oh, please stop using that key because it was the wrong key or I lost the personal key. Please don't ever use it. So I think for this scenario, it's helpful to also be able to say, no, don't use this key. So we have to a permanent way to blacklist it. And if we do that, then we get a bad signature icon and an explanation that we have rejected this key previously. Okay, now let's, okay, this is an encrypted key, an encrypted message. We also allow you to feed your own key to which it was encrypted. And for your own keys, the acceptance, of course, is not necessary. It's automatically accepted. So here's one detail also which we have not implemented. If you import public keys, which you have previously signed yourself with your own secret key with GNU-PG. So you would assume that we already treat them as accepted. Yes, that's a to-do, we haven't yet done it yet. So now let's try writing a message. Let's say I send an email to myself and also to Patrick, the Enigmail maintainer. So what happens? I don't have his key yet, but I'll enable encryption. And I say send. What happens? I can't send it. I don't have, there are problems with the keys of the foreign recipient. Let's see what's happening. We explain the user what's going on. You must obtain and accept the public key for each recipient. And for Patrick, we don't have a key available yet. We can try to manage. So we don't have any keys yet. Let's see if this has a key somewhere on a public server. Apparently, yes. Let's import it. Okay. Again, I'm invited to look at these details now. Let's skip that for now and see what happens. I see not accepted. I have not yet made the decision if I accept this key. And in the overall summary, I get no accepted key. So let's fix that. And say, all right, I want to communicate with him. Now the key is accepted. Okay. I probably should tell Patrick that he should ignore this message. And I'm able to send it. And if I look at my send folder, there it is. It's encrypted and signed. And yeah. And again, if I look at my own signature for my own key, no, what I wanted to say is that right now we don't have this additional person icon. If it's your own key, we don't need to say whether it's accepted or verified or not. It's your own key. Okay, so I have only a little bit more of my slides left, very little, and then we can soon go to the questions. So some things that we were often asked about is the smart card situation. Right now, RMP library doesn't yet support smart cards. So what should we do? And here's an idea that we are experimenting with. We've already made some initial steps. It's not yet finished. But the idea is maybe we should allow the advanced users to optionally use GNU-PG. We don't want to by default because we don't want to bundle it and we don't require everyone to have it. But maybe for expert users, it's okay to, they can manually install their dependencies, they can install smart card drivers and whatever else is required. But then we have to ask what kind of functionality should we allow GNU-PG to be used for? Well, public key management is a complex feature. And if we have our own implementation inside Thunderbird, then it would probably be confusing or complicated to support two completely different implementations for public key trust management integrated into application. So the current thinking is that for all public key operations, we still use always RMP and only optionally allow the use of GNU-PG for secret key operations like signing and encryption. So we have partially implemented that. There's a pref that you can enable, and it will already work with decryption. But for signing, it will require some more work. We will have to use these two different layers of PGP my messages, where one layer is signed and the other one is then encrypted. So yeah, what's missing and what's next? We have the base functionality, but many essential details are not yet done. There will be a link soon which leads you to a wiki page. There's a status section which lists the current status of what we have done and not yet done. Please have a look. We have to work on a lot of correctness and convenience features, both in the RMP library together with the library developers and in Thunderbird directly. And a very large part that we haven't yet done is migration for previous Enigma users. So, and that's something where Patrick is trying to help. He's currently working and experimenting with an approach to potentially use a new revision of the Enigmail add-on, which is no longer Enigmail, but only is an Enigmail migration assistant, and which would use the web experiments feature, so it still have some low-level access, and maybe use this approach to migrate keys and settings over. But that's just a status update. We are not sure if this approach will work. Let's see how it goes. Another option could be to use the GNU-PG ME library, which we integrate anyway for the fallback to GNU-PG and Smallcast. That could be potentially another mechanism to make migration work. But yeah, that library is not available everywhere where GNU-PG is installed, so it wouldn't work as seamlessly. So yeah, that's a big topic, and maybe we have to have this detail sorted and fixed before we can enable it by default. So we still have lots of details to look at and decisions to make and details to solve. So if you can, please get involved, test, help us, find issues, report them. You can find on this page, you can find links to the status I mentioned and the ways how to interact with that. And I would love to hear from you. Thank you. That's my talk. So now we are ready for questions.
Very good. Thank you, Kai. Okay, we've got the first question here. Ketty, do you want to ask it?
Sure. Thank you, Kai, for the presentation. My question is, why use a memory unsafe language?
Hello, is anyone there? Oh, okay.
Kai, can you hear me?
Okay, you know what? For the whole session, I'm using an external speaker, and for the whole time during the whole session, apparently in the middle, that external speaker went to standby, so I couldn't hear anything yet that you spoke. But now I'm hearing you.
Okay, Ketty is asking a question. Go ahead, Ketty.
I will try again. Yeah, thank you, Kai, for the presentation. The question is, why use a library that was written in a memory unsafe language? I would hope that, in 2020, we try to move away from these because there's source of memory corruption bugs that in the worst case lead to remote code execution, which is something I hope we would want to avoid.
It's a very good point. And we looked at many options, various options. So the two options we looked at are Sequoia, but that's GPL. Same limitations as GNU-PG, cannot bundle it, so we cannot use it, unfortunately. Also, you could argue, while Sequoia is written in Rust, I believe that they use an underlying C library for the crypto primitive method. So I think that's, so you could argue it's not a perfect improvement because it's not complete Rust, and also because of the license situation we can't really use it. And then there is another thing. There is an RPGP implementation from Friedel Tiedelmeier, who works with the Delta Chat community, that I think it seems also in a rather early state. A lot of the cryptography, the lower cryptography primitives seem to be very fresh. So I've heard in the meantime that they're working on formal verification and have already done some of them. But all in all, it seems rather a fresh library. So it wasn't a perfect choice. And on the other hand, we have the question, how do we integrate it and how do we rewrite, how do we integrate the new library? And because Enigmail is written in JavaScript, and because we have the JavaScript C types bridge to C libraries and C APIs, that was easy to access. So it required less work. I'm guessing it required less work than having to access directly a Rust API from a JavaScript code. And I think these are all the Rust libraries that I'm aware of. And so it seemed like the RMP library was a more convenient choice, also because it uses a Botan crypto library, which seems to be very well formally verified and reviewed.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. That was a very exhaustive answer. So I guess if people wanted to help the project, one way is to maybe develop a library that has a proper license so it can be used in Thunderbird. Maybe a side note, people stop using the GPL. It doesn't have the effect you want it to have. People won't publish their project as a GPL. They just won't use your library. The second option is to have an OpenPGP library that implements the primitives in a memory safe way, so many people can.
So that could be a long-term option, but that
right.
won't help us short-term. In the short term, we rather need more help with versions that we have almost working and that we need to polish up. But yeah, of course, in the long term, if it could be an option, but it's a long way to go. I think developing an OpenPGP library is not a small task. But maybe in a couple of years, that could be an option. But then again, you have to see, is it necessary to switch over? Will we have enough? Maybe the RMP library people then will be sad that they helped us so much, and then we move away from that. But yeah, the future is open, and if Mozilla and Thunderbird ever gets to a state where most of it is written in Rust, then probably you're right. Then probably, of course, the OpenPGP part should be Rust too. Okay.
Very
Other
good.
questions?
Yeah, we have one from Tom. Tom, are you able to share your question?
So I see the message.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read it for you. Tom asks, wouldn't it be a lot less clicks if you automatically tried to discover missing PGP keys, like when you tried to send Patrick an encrypted mail?
So yeah, the least amount of clicks would be that we just discover it and use it automatically, right? But we want to involve the user. So we want the user to be aware of what's happening. So if you're just saying from the amount of clicks, sure, we could. And that's something that needs to be discussed, I think, with user interface experts what's the best situation here. This is just an initial version, and we can see if that how this could be optimized and still be understandable for the user. So I'm open for that in the future, but it's just an initial state yet.
Great. Christopher, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Kai, for your presentation, for keeping us updated on the progress so far. I would be interested if you could give us some more details on the smart card support you're planning on. Do you think it will be usable by the release of Thunderbird 78 in July?
So I don't want to promise it yet. I think because I consider smart card support not a blocker, because if you're an expert, you probably, and if you're an expert and know how to use smart cards, you probably know what you're doing, and you probably, in the worst case, find something else to do. So this seems like one of the details that could wait a little more, and we have more important features that urgently need to be implemented. I would hope that we will be able to add it as a feature during the lifetime of the 78.x release cycle for 1 year. But it's difficult to say how soon it will be. On the other hand, there's not that much missing, maybe. For example, while we are discussing the user interface for the key configuration for the user's own personal key, we already take into account the option that you might want to configure an external key. And so from the sending part, we really need only get the signature creation done with a secret key, which requires that we do a two-step approach when sending a message. You know, PGP offers several package formats, and one package format is which uses a combined signature and encryption package. And we wouldn't use that if you use a smart card for signing and RMP for encryption, but rather we would have to have two different layers at MIME. We would have initially we would have my multi-part message, which is a detached signature, and that would be created by the external GNU-PG with your smart card. And then when we have that result, we would give that to the RMP library for encryption to the recipient. And we don't currently have that two-layer MIME encoding done yet, but it's not super complicated. So if someone wants to hack on that, so that would be a welcome contribution. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. And one more question. Isn't there any interference to be expected when you work with your own keyring, and then at the other hand, when you have the GPG-ME library at the other hand that has its own GPG keyring? Are there any interferences to be expected, or how does this work?
We wouldn't use the public keyring at all from GNU-PG. We would only use and access the one secret key you have configured with an advanced expert configuration, where you say, please use this secret key from GNU-PG as my personal key. And then of course, we would have, to be consistent, we would have to do a one-time import of your own public key into our regular storage of public keys. And then I currently cannot see any interference if we avoid accessing GNU-PG for public keys and for public key management and public key draft management.
Okay.
But if you can see, please report it. That would be very good to know if you can think of any problematic situation.
All right, yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Tito has a question. Tito, are you able to voice your question?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for your presentation, and it was very interesting. You have just mentioned that you're working on a library that will include Bhutan. And Bhutan is a pure C++ library in this case. How are you planning to execute those C++ codes as within your add-on? I might miss something, but I'm just curious since right now everything is JavaScript. So it should be some kind of layer in between that will be translating all this stuff. Bhutan is very interesting in this case since it exposed some interesting methods like big end and maybe some hashing and block cipher algorithms that you might be also interested in. But I'm just curious about the layer, how you're planning to call those Bhutan methods.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. We don't call directly into Bhutan at all. We only call into the RNP library. So we have a layer of libraries on top. We have Thunderbird, which uses Enigmail, and all its implementation of Enigmail is done in JavaScript. And from JavaScript, whenever we need to process OpenPGP messages and keys, we call into the RNP library. The RNP library interface is pure C. And we have a bridge technology that Mozilla implemented, which they also use inside of Firefox, and which we can use in Thunderbird too. This bridge technology allows you to make calls, function calls, from the JavaScript layer to a C API. That layer is called JavaScript C types, JSC types. And because Bhutan is only used as a dependency by RNP, we don't have to do any calls into Bhutan directly. We only call RNP APIs. And we both said separately, because of that layering, we also don't have a link time dependency. We don't have the regular linkings that you would have with C or C++ libraries. So rather, it's only a runtime. We use that dynamic library, dynamic opening at runtime, and call into the function APIs via that library handle. That's how the JavaScript C types interface working. And that also means that we can have a completely separate build process for the RNP library and for the Bhutan libraries. Only the RNP library will have a link time dependency on Bhutan. And in theory, if you start up JavaScript and we cannot load the RNP library, if we can't find it, then Thunderbird user interface will probably still show up, but the functionality will be degraded. Yeah, so we have a pretty much isolation, which is also necessary because, for example, Bhutan uses C++ exception in its code, while the Mozilla code, which also uses a lot of C++, disallows the use of exceptions. So that I think we might not be even be able to directly link the Thunderbird code to a library that includes Bhutan. So it's good that we have this bridging layer in between, which abstracted from the Bhutan details.
Thank you. And maybe just a follow-up question as a part of the first one. Have you considering using WebAssembly as an alternative in this case? Since I have tried this with Botan, and as a matter of fact, tried this in Thunderbird. So just build a very simple add-on and WASM file, compiled Botan to WASM and loaded it up. So I was able to execute IIS and different methods from Botan. So I'm just curious, have you considered this as an option?
I don't know much about WebAssembly. I've never used it. I've never looked at the details. And even if I considered it to use, so currently right now, I don't understand which benefit it would give me. And because, but it also, even if we were able to access Botan using that technology, it still wouldn't solve our problem because Botan provides crypto primitives, but not the higher level OpenP messaging data structures and protocol implementations. So no, not considered. And if you have a suggestion how this should be used and what, if it could help us in some way, please feel free to post your suggestion. But yeah, it would be probably necessary to have a good reason why we would have to use it.
Yeah, thank you. I will.
Thanks.
Paul, you want to voice your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kai. This is really interesting stuff. It's good to see where things stand. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about which features from Enigmail or which aspects or features that will no longer be offered under this new native implementation.
So good question. And I'm sure I won't be able to enumerate all of them. For example, I could pick out one detail. For example, okay, let's go into complicated world. If you have an OpenPGP personal key, you know, you have a personal and a private key, but it's not that simple. You could have your key is in most scenarios is already more complex than this abstraction. You usually have actually 4 keys. You usually have at least two private keys and 2 public keys. The reason is that you usually create a separate key for signing, certification, authentication, and a different key for encryption. There could be algorithm limitations that makes it necessary to have 2 different keys, or there could be, or it could be because you say, well, if I ever for example, you could say, I have a default key expiration on my key. You could say, well, I define that for my signing key, I define an endless expiration or no expiration at all. So it's valid forever or for many years. But because if you lose your private key, it's not giving you much trouble. You simply cannot longer decrypt, but at least other people will no longer okay. It's difficult to explain that, but if you have an encryption key, if you broadcast an encryption key into the world, then other people find it and send you encrypted messages. And if you lose your private key for that, then you suddenly can no longer decrypt them. So it's a hassle if you out there have a copy of your encryption key and you no longer can decrypt it. So it's reasonable to have an expiration date for the encryption part of your key. So it's a sign of self-protection. So the trouble won't be too bad. It's at least in 1 or 2 years, the encrypted messages will stop. while for the signing key, you could say, well, it's a hassle to renew that often because I won't get into that much trouble. Future emails will not be affected by losing the private key. But and for that reason, some people say, let's make a complex setup of my personal key. They say, well, I have my primary key, which is a signing key, and I have one sub key, which is an encryption key, which I let expire after 1 year. And then after the 1 year is over, I just create a new encryption key, which is combined with my existing signing key. So I probably explained that really bad. Sorry for not being prepared for the explanation. But the fact is that people out there in the world really use complicated keys, and which require maintenance. Every once in a while, you must go back at your key and rethink how you're doing, how you're structuring, what keys, what sub keys of that do I want to revoke, and which new ones do I need, and which ones of those do I want to change the expiration date, which you can. And and if you want to offer this full flexibility in the user interface, you need some kind of complex user interface, and that's what Enigmail has. You have a user interface where you clearly see the structure of all your subkeys, and you can individually see the elements and manage and edit them. And also user IDs. You could say, I want to have a new email address, but I want to have only one key for all my email addresses. So why don't I edit my old key and change the user IDs that are associated to it, or delete an old email address that was associated to it and I no longer want to have to use. So there's a lot of flexibility that GNU-PG offers. And initially, we're not supporting that. Initially, when you generate a key, we will just give you a simple pair of 2 keys, and that's it. And that also for the management of your own key, when you really decide, okay, let's expire it, then we currently use a simple approach and use the same expiration for both subkeys, for both the primary and the subkey. And also when we then implement user interface for extending your own keys, extending the lifetime of your own key, we can then also keep it simple and don't have to offer the users a full detailed user interface. And just, we could, for example, what's currently in mind is we could check if it's a simple key where everything is the same and consistent. We can have a simple UI which tells the user, okay, this key expires at that date. We want to extend the lifetime. Okay, how long? Okay, that's it. And if we detect that's a more complex key, we could then say, sorry, we don't have management ability for this complex key, which you probably have managed externally. Please use your external software to manage this advanced key and then import it again. So that's one example. I cannot right now think of other examples, but I'm sure there are plenty of them. If you go to the, for example, a good way to find out is probably if you download Thunderbird 68 and install Enigmail and look at and open the key management dialog and look at all the options you have there, and then compare it with what we offer in 78. It's a much smaller list. Okay, and maybe an important detail is that Enigmail in the past offered an alternative mode of operation, which they call junior mode, which uses a complete alternative user interface, which also uses an opportunistic approach, opportunistic encryption approach. So it's you don't have to prepare anything. It will just automatically make a key for you and start distributing it to people without you having to confirm it. So it automatically sets you up for encryption. And we don't have that mode. And for example, it also offered autocrypt, which means key distribution automatically, not even for yourself, but also when you send a group email, it will gossip the keys of all users, so that everyone who wants to reply already has all the keys. So we don't have that yet. We could consider to add that. The key distribution for group email is not a bad idea. But then, for example, the autocrypt also suggests that you automatically replace a new key if you receive it. I think we don't want to have that in Thunderbird. Yeah. So, and in order to give you more details, I would have to go look at the Thunderbird and Enigma user interface to remember them.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. It helps to get a sense of it.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you very much, Kai, for your talk. I really appreciated it. Give you a little bit of applause.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, well, we'll call it then. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Obviously, we can continue the chat in the OpenPGP room that Kai shared here. Obviously, if you have any further questions, I would hit Kai up via this contact information. And yeah, our next talk is on Tuesday. Let me pull it up. It is on Tuesday at 1700 UTC. It will be given by Alessandro. It's called The Importance of Whitespace, a UI Experiment. And so I encourage everyone to tune in there via the same link that you used to get here. So very cool. Thanks again, Kai, and we'll see y'all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.